Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Hillary Gowans, Director of Content Strategy at the Illinois Policy Institute. And Hillary, since you're the Director of Content and Strategy surrounding content, this seems an appropriate topic to get your viewpoint on, and it's the whole furor surrounding quote-unquote fake news posted on Facebook, websites that are curating fake news content, people not being able to distinguish the Onion from legitimate outlets. I can't distinguish the Onion from the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune often, so I guess it's a bit of an eye of the beholder question, but Google and Facebook have both made mention of cracking down on so-called fake news sites. And so how does one determine what's fake and what's not? There was a fun little Reason.com blog that referenced a communication professor at Merrimack College in Massachusetts who created a list of fake news sources for her students so they would know, but she includes as fake news LouRockwell.com, who's just a libertarian op-ed writer, von Mises Institute, economist and op-ed writer. I mean, it's not fake, it's his opinion. Red State, Eric Erickson's former outlet. Breitbart, of course. So those aren't fake news sites, even if that professor, wishes to characterize them as such.
So I think this question of legitimacy in the news is really interesting. There's sort of this purity test for people when it comes to journalism. And, they look at places like the New York Times and CNN and they think, oh, these outlets must be infallible. They have been around the longest. There are a lot of good reporters at these outlets, to be sure.
Not according to Trump.
Well, you've got newsrooms filled with all kinds of different people. But I think it's really scary when you start hearing people throw around terms like fake news because it gets to this even scarier topic, which you see crop up every few years, and that's in states across the country, someone will propose an idea to license journalists because the fear is that if we don't have the real journalists writing the real news, that the people might be endangered. And really what you're proposing is that the government be able to say, yes, you may or no, you may not write about the politicians who are going to be approving or denying your license.
Right. And the great thing about this is it starts from this false premise, this propaganda from, quote unquote, the real journalists from the D.C. press corps and their corollary press corps like in Chicago, that if you work for a major daily newspaper or a network affiliate, you're an objective scrivener of the passing scene. When in point of fact, we know from opinion polling, since 1960, Gallup, 84 to 92% of the Gang of 500, as Mark Halperin calls them, the D.C. press corps, the opinion leaders, 84 to 92% vote for the Democrat nominee for president. We know what the donations were from the press corps to Trump versus Clinton, 90-10, 95-5, actually. We know what the distribution of Democrats versus Republicans is in the university professorate. So the idea that you have this monolith in media, quote unquote, mainstream media, old media, DC press corps, Chicago press corps, they're all coming from the same perspective, but they want to have you suspend disbelief that their worldview informs the stories they choose to cover and write and the angles from which they choose to write them. And it's just a bunch of nonsense. And the great thing about the digital age is now you have this ubiquity of outlets. And, basically, I think it's an issue of transparency. And then people can make their own decisions in terms of which content they find valuable and which content they don't.
Yeah. You mentioned innovators at the Illinois Policy Institute. We run our outlet much like a newsroom. And there are the basic tenets of journalism that you always have to follow if you want to be considered credible. We do have a point of view, and we are not we're very transparent about that. But other outlets,
you're only a legitimate journalist if you pretend not to have a
right,
point
and
of
that's
view. If you're honest about your point of view, so that people can factor that into the content, make up your own minds. Here's my point of view. Here's the argument. Here's the evidence to support the argument. You make your own call on it. then
Right.
you're not a journalist.
And that's what's so funny. I mean, just objectively, I consider myself a rational human being. And I remember going to CNN.com during the election, and the homepage of CNN.com was like laugh out loud funny because you would pull up.
Unintentionally.
Right. And, you know, you pull up these headlines and it's 4 or 5 about Trump and all of these nefarious things that he's doing. And, you know, if it's not misleading, even if the headlines are totally accurate, there's definitely agenda pushing. So there are layers within the problem here. There are these articles that are definitely biased, but then overall, the agenda that they have is, you know, becoming even more transparent. I think that there's sort of a division here too. I mean, a lot of the legacy national media are having this problem. I actually came from the Northwest Herald, where I was a reporter before I joined the Illinois Policy Institute. And I think a lot of the local newspapers, like the Northwest Herald, are still doing a lot of valuable reporting. And it's funny because you know, there's this local focus and local accountability, and then at the national level, things just seem to fall apart and go totally the other way.
Well, I mean, you had this incredible statement from Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, after the election results, where he essentially said in, you know, Eastern Seaboard lexicon that we're going to try honest reporting. We may have skewed a little bit too much to one side. We're going to give this honest reporting, transparent reporting thing a go. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last over at the Gray Lady, but just that admission says something about, you know, kind of the sliding scale of who gets to decide which is a legitimate news outlet and which isn't, I think.
Right. And, you know, saying that something's fake just because you don't agree with it is really, really immature. And there are outlets that provide different types of writing and opinion for both sides. And that's great. I think that's what's one of the best things that's come of the digital age. There's an abundance of news out there. There's an abundance of ideas, and you can read whatever you want. You can read Vox. You can read the Illinois Policy Institute. You can read Cato. You can read The Atlantic. You can figure out what you think based on reading both sides of the coin.